So welcome to this briefing for CIB members and other guests about the GLOBE initiative, the Global Consensus on Sustainability on the Built Environment. In a moment, I'm going to hand over to Michael Habbo-Faber, the chair of the Joint Committee for the Globe Consensus, who will take us through a full description of the activity. But first of all, I would just like to introduce CIB. I'm Don Ward. I'm the Chief Executive of CIB, the International Council for Research and Innovation in Buildings and Construction. We're the global network for collaboration between researchers and those interested in innovation in the built environment. And we do three things. We provide a global network for collaboration for research. We support tomorrow's talent in terms of innovation in the sector, young people, and we campaign on issues which matter in the world of innovation, whether that's funding, whether it's research impact. CIB communicates our work in terms of the impact which construction research can have on the UN Sustainable Development Goals and their attainment or progress towards their attainment. And I would hope that for most people, this framework is an extremely familiar framework. It's the framework which is the basis for discussions at the COP, Congress of the Parties conference each year, this year to be held in November, December in Dubai, this year, 2023, that is. We organize our work, we communicate our work around this framework. There are two obvious goals which relate directly to the construction and built environment industry. Those are goals 9 and 11, but there are plenty of other goals where construction has challenges which it needs to address to improve our performance in these respects. There are also plenty of areas where construction has a massive part to play in the delivery of better built environment in order to support goals 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, for example. And ultimately, no poverty, reduced inequality also follow. So, our argument is that most of the UN Sustainable Development Goals are addressed at least in part by our sector. And I would further argue which other sector has a more important role to play in achievement of, a sustainable planet. 40 working commissions and task groups which CIB manages and coordinates, which brings together researchers around the globe, and at least half of them are focused on aspects of environmental or social or economic sustainability, at least half. And here are some of those titles. I won't dwell on them now in the interest of time, so we can get to Michael. In adding value to our Commission's work and our focus on the Sustainable Development Goals, we have 3 external partners and initiatives where we work with other organizations. The first is the SBE Sustainable Built Environment Conference Series, in which we're a partner with ISB, FIDIC, and UNEP since 2003 now, so 20 years. We're coming up to the next World Sustainable Conference, which is going to be a virtual one in the middle of next year. The second is we're a member of the Global Alliance for Building and Construction, the Global ABC, which produces the annual stock take, if you will, of the contribution of the impact that the construction and built environment sector is having on the planet as a basis for discussions at COP each year. So the report for COP28 must be due out in the next month or so. And thirdly, we are involved in the Global Consensus through the Liaison Committee, which is a coming together of 6 major global civil engineering organizations, including ECCS, FIB, who are on this call, IABSI, IAS, and RILEM. And there's a little bit more information about the SBE conference series, which moves around the globe, holding regional events, so people don't have to travel too far to them. The Global ABC that I've mentioned, the Global Status Report, due out really any week now. And finally, the Liaison Committee, which has 2 joint subcommittees of focus, of specialism. One on structural safety, which is now 50 years old, and one on the Globe Consensus, which is a little younger than that. And that allows me nicely to hand over to its chair, president, I think, and it was Michael's turn, of that committee in order to explain Globe in more detail. Michael Habvo-Paver, welcome, and over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I don't know. Some of you may actually have heard a little bit about Globe, some of you more, but I will try to assume that you don't know too much, and then give you a fast introduction. First, a few words on the challenges of the future construction, which is motivation for what we are doing in Globe. And then I would like to talk about the liaison committee, but only for a minute or two, and the role of the liaison committee and member associations of the liaison committee. And then I will talk more about the Globe Consensus and the main activities of the joint committee on the Globe Consensus, and some next steps, which are, I hope, also clearly inviting for engagement of professionals from the CIB, as well as from other potential contributors. We all know that we are dealing with a very substantial industry. If we look at what is already constructed, the amounts of structures and infrastructure systems is very overwhelming. We are now looking into, let's say, a transition into renewables and making great efforts to become more sustainable. And in that process, of course, there's also an enormous amount of renewal of systems that is required. And right now, the stock keeping of, for instance, wind turbine systems, we have about a good quarter of 1,000,000 of these things already up and standing. But this is going to increase very substantially, especially in the offshore domain. And other similar activities, electrification of railways, introduction of driverless vehicles, and all these very good ideas on how to become more sustainable, they are going to have significant impact also in the built environment. We have realized, and this is the main issue here, that we have been pushing the boundaries of or the capacities of the Earth system to sustain human activities. We have been pushing that over the limit on several of what is called the planetary boundaries. CO2 emissions, or CO2 equivalent emissions, is one major burning concern. And what we are dealing with here is the decarbonization of the construction sector. We need to push that. It's quite, actually, you have seen these figures many times from the IPCC. But what is really instructive in this figure here, where we see different scenarios for future development of global temperature, we see that the IPCC, they actually point at one super important thing here, and that is the difference between developments in what can be assumed a heterogeneous world and a convergent world. So a convergent world is one where we actually are able to collaborate and coordinate around the globe, and the heterogeneous version is, I think, maybe the version that we see a little bit too much in the later couple of years. The difference in global temperature increased by 2100 is 2 degrees. So if we would be able to ensure that we could establish a strong collaboration around the globe, if maybe the politicians can, maybe they cannot, but if the profession can, there is significant potential to have an impact. We all know that the built environment is very important, both for the development of we need in order to increase welfare around the world, but it also is a big consumer of energy and materials, and as a result, also a significant contributor to emissions. And we also know what the trends are indicating. We will, on the African continent, we are looking at a scenario of an increase of the population with 1 billion ahead to 2050. This is very significant, and also a significant increase in welfare, which means that we need much more housing and infrastructure. And actually, when we look at the global south, ahead to 2050, the proportion of new construction globally, 9/10 or 90% of that is assumed to take place in the global south. We have been focusing a lot on this new construction in the global south, also in the groups involved in GLOBE here over the last couple of years. And I think maybe we have not made it too clear or clear enough that we are also actually dealing with a very big challenge related to renewal of already existing structures. And when we look at the very positive societal developments of countries like China, of course, we have to understand that these developments, they are based not least on the development of infrastructure systems and the built environment in general. These structures are now, and they are, we all know, there are huge amounts of construction in countries, for instance, like China. The thing is that these structures are now approaching their first renewal. So they simply have to be renewed within the next 10, 15, or 20 years. And that has, well, of course, an enormous effect for emissions from construction at a global level. So the renewal is a topic that we need not to forget. We also see over time how welfare has developed. We see here some plots of societal developments for around 200 nation states around the world. We see traces of how life expectancy and GDP per capita in different nation states have developed over time. And we see that there's a strong correlation here. And these characteristics here are also characteristics which go into the Human Development Index and the Life Quality Index and other indexes to indicate welfare. What we also see is that there are the unfortunate trends that economy and emissions are strongly correlated. And this is really the challenge that we are facing. So we want more welfare, we want to maintain welfare. But as it looks now, the way we do it, when we improve economic developments, we also increase emissions substantially. There are also significant challenges, namely that the building and construction markets are governed by price and fulfillment of code requirements, contracts, and projects, focusing on deviations from assumptions stipulated in contracts and corresponding compensations, much more than soundness and excellence of engineering concepts and solutions. And we also see that the recent, let's say, international standards, despite the fact that they have opened up for the possibility of putting more focus on sustainability, this does not flow into best practice very fast. We just had a revision of the Eurocode systems, and with respect to sustainability, there could be much more done than has been done. There are no specific requirements in the basis for the design. And it will take a while until we have a new revision. So we have a lot of challenges now, as Don already introduced. The liaison committee was founded in 1957 by the associations. Here you see the associations behind the liaison committee at present. When it all started, the names were a little bit different. The constellation was different, but it's essentially the same the same platform that, of course, also has evolved a little bit over time. These associations, they got together in 1971 and formed the Joint Committee on Structural Safety. And that was simply because the association realized that they had a common interest, namely to establish more fundamental knowledge on safety of structures and knowledge on how this can be introduced into best practice. The Joint Committee on Structural Safety has been operating, as you may realize, for more than 50 years and is still existing and working on the same topics. The role of the liaison committee and these associations, and of course not only the mentioned associations, but associations more generally seen, but of course now focusing on the liaison committee, has an enormous important role on engineering, civil engineering, structural engineering, material science, and material engineering. In the sense that they are a carrier and developer of relevant engineering knowledge over time. So we have the associations, including professionals from industry, from academia, from own organizations, manufacturers, etc. And based on these associations and the committee work which is undertaken in the associations have a huge impact on the best practices. They are actually the knowledge carriers and the let's say the doorkeepers of best practices. And this is an amazing important role, being one of the most important contributors to standards and codes, for instance, ISO, Eurocode, SAS2, and so on, and also how to use standards and codes. Global reach and global knowledge. In 2019, we got together a group of people in order to address what we all realized was a huge challenge, a huge task for people in structural engineering, namely to reduce CO2 emissions. And we got together and we had a workshop on sustainability in the built environment at Tongji University. And you could say that in a way that was the starting point of the globe and the globe consensus. And this workshop was organized by the Joint Committee on Structural Safety and also the International Joint Research Center for Engineering Reliability and Stochastic Mechanics at Tongji University. And I will not read up all this material, but we had a super good workshop, and we identified, let's say, main challenges and main bottlenecks at the time. And we put it into a piece of paper, which we then later called, or which later became the globe consensus. on sustainability in the built environment. Here you see the timeline. We don't need to go into these details, but I just want to indicate that after this workshop in China, we took the consensus document back to the Joint Committee on Structural Safety, and we engaged in a dialogue with the liaison committee on how we might be able to bring this further. The liaison committee supported that very substantially and suggested that we attract members from the associations to participate in a cross association group, expert group, who could develop the consensus document further and make sure that it would reflect all the opinions and perspectives of the associations behind the liaison committee. And eventually, the liaison committee also decided to form a new joint committee, namely the Joint Committee on the Global Consensus, with the objective to push decarbonization of the built environment. And without going into details of the Globe Consensus document, you see here a list of contents where we are outlining the idea and main message of Globe, the sustainability challenge for the built environment, which we have already talked about, and then also introducing a new paradigm for governance of the built environment and pointing at facilitators and actions which are required. We also have here, you have the link to the Globe Consensus homepage. And you can find this document, the Globe Consensus document, on the homepage, and you can find it in many different languages, which we believe is quite essential. We also, in terms of main activities, main activity last year was the issuing of a policy advice document in the connection with the COP27 conference. This is where we are summarizing what we consider to be the most important perspectives presented, let's say, in a form that it can support, let's say, major decision makers, policy makers, decision makers from the industry and from governance on what are the bottlenecks, what are the potentials, and how should we proceed. I would also like to point at a few other recent developments. We have here over the last couple of years initiated workshops in order to identify bottlenecks and potentials and to engage with experts across the globe, and also workshops or benchmark studies in order to understand in the way that we are constructing buildings now, where is it that we are doing good things? That means using materials in a way that the emissions are small, and where is it that we are doing the inefficient things? So where is it that we are overspending CO2 emissions? This is going to give us a baseline understanding of course, where we are now and which approaches, which techniques, which choices of structural design are good, and where do we need and how can we most efficiently improve. We are also benchmarking safety format of codes, because the safety format, the way safety is ensured in design codes and assessment codes of structures, is absolutely decisive on how the material is allocated in structural design. And we are trying to benchmark different safety formats from different codes, like the European code, the Chinese code, the Brazilian code, in order to see where the potentials are also for improving best practices for code-based design. And you can see that we have a good reach out with these benchmark studies, both in Europe, in South America, and in China. We have an activity and an action plan, which you can find on our homepage. I'm not going into the details, but it sets out, let's say, main activities and the organizational framework of the Joint Committee on the Global Consensus. And also, I would like to point at here, closing my short presentation, how to engage. We really would like active and interested people from the associations, but also from other associations and those already in the liaison committee. Of course, we want to engage with associations in principle around the world insofar that they are relevant for our quest. And you can easily get involved if you would like to contribute, you have an interest, and you feel that you have something to contribute with, then become a member of a working party, become a member of the Joint Committee on the Global Consensus, take initiative together with some colleagues to organize events, to set up activities, and to conduct activities. It's very important that we have people who are able, who have an interest in, and who also have resources to pull through real activities. And of course, also supporting dissemination. We must act faster. We need to establish a consensus on what can be considered to be best available knowledge on how to reduce CO2 emissions. And with the help of the associations and other actors, other stakeholders, we must find a way to get the best available knowledge into best practices, and this at global scale. So this is not something we can sit and do at desktop in a few places in the world. We need to get this type of activity distributed globally over time. The best practices can only be changed in the different locations in the world. It's not something that can be decided somewhere and then automatically rolled out. Of course, regulation is a part of best practice, and for instance, the framework of ISO codes and codes which apply more or less on a continental basis are strong instruments in pushing for sustainable construction globally, but the real impact has to take place locally. Yeah. So roles of associations in all this. Please engage in the Joint Committee on the Global Consensus and help to identify the needs, potentials, establish, collect fundamental knowledge, provide global outreach, inform, educate in local scales, and support dissemination and coordination. Thanks for your attention. And of course, any comments or questions or suggestions are super welcome.
Michael, thank you very much indeed. And perhaps you could unshare the slides so that our participants can see us. That's great, Michael. That was really good. Thanks for that overview. And for those CIB members here, I think you could see from Michael's penultimate slide why it is that I felt it was important that CIB members had this briefing to understand what GLOBE is about and were aware of it. But I feel like there must be contributions to be made from the CIB network. We have academics from 60 odd countries, all major continents. So the global south is very well represented in CIB. So I wanted to bring this to the attention of our members to see if they did indeed want to respond to the opportunities that you set out there in your slides. I've put in the chat the email contacts for Michael. I hope that's okay, Michael. Your email and my email, so that anybody can just contact us directly if they wish to. It's perfectly possible for us to share the slides after this event, and we're happy to do that. So I will follow up accordingly. So yeah, the message is please be aware of Globe, and please, if you have interest, please get involved. Anyone who knows him, Jeremy Gibbard of CSIR in South Africa has agreed to be our lead representative in the Globe committee on behalf of CIB. He is the coordinator of our Working Commission 116 on smart and sustainable built environments. So he's one of those 23 commissions that I mentioned earlier that have a very clear interest in the agenda of Globe. But there's plenty of opportunities to join the committee and participate in its work, as Michael set out. So if anybody wishes to get in contact, please do. And I'd like to feel that CIB members could make a bigger contribution to Globe than so far we've been able to help our members to do. So any questions from those participants, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask verbally, or you can always put anything in the chat if that's a more convenient way to communicate. Any questions, folks? Questions or comments on any aspect of anything that Michael's had to say, or indeed that I've had to say? Michael, I think you've overwhelmed everybody. Clearly,
so I'm really sorry about that. No,
I meant that in a good way.
Maybe just let's say a little more loosely. So one of the besides our workshops and benchmark studies, and they are really involving kind of activities. We meet a couple of times a year for ordinary joint committee meetings in the Globe, where we talk about possibilities for engagement as one aspect. We talk about ideas and initiatives that are in the planning, and of course we talk about ongoing activities. We also we are reaching out, of course, to other associations, as I indicated, and the global ABC is surely one of those which we are also engaging with. I had meetings last week, with some of these people, I would say. We also recently, a couple of weeks ago, we had meetings with the ACI, where we also want to keep a little bit in close contact and to see how more new initiatives at the ACI can be coordinated, and maybe we can achieve some synergy with our activities in Globe. And we are meeting also with the ACI at a convention in Boston later in November this year, actually. We have a good network of collaborations in the South Americas, where we have engaged with CONPAT, and also the concrete industry and research of Brazil, IBRACON. And we also have a good contact to governments, governmental bodies in Africa, especially with the angle of materials testing and certification. and we will for sure get much closer to stakeholders in Africa here over the next months and years. We are facing a huge task, but there's only one way to eat an elephant. You take one bite at the time, and eventually you will get it. This is what we are up against, but on top of the huge task, we also have time pressure, and it's of course always a balance to do the right things when you have to do something really big and very fast. We need to prioritize. So many of the things that we are not doing, it's not because we think that they are not relevant, but we are really trying to go for the activities that can contribute the most in the shortest time frame. That does not mean that many other activities are not relevant. They just come a little bit later, or they come where and when people who have a particular interest in looking at these engage. Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. I see, David, you've come online. Did you want to ask a question or make a comment?
Just maybe we can say that there is going to be a meeting of this group in Berlin in November. So this
14 and 15, yes.
Yeah, so it's a good opportunity for somebody to join or to come.
Absolutely. And if anybody who hear this, David, if anybody at the meeting or if anybody else, this is an open invitation. So you just contact me, and if you cannot participate in person, this is not a big problem. We will be having the meeting hybrid, but there will be quite some people coming in person, and it's always more interesting if it's possible. Yeah.
I think that's worth saying. A lot of your meetings have been either hybrid or you've had a mix of online and face-to-face meetings. When I found the face-to-face meetings extremely stimulating in terms of the variety, the range of experts from different parts of the world. David and I attended an event. Where were we, David? Were we in Switzerland? Yes, we were sometime last year, which was particularly interesting workshop on the challenges of concrete, in particular, I recall. So I don't think there are any other comments or questions. Just remains for me to thank Michael for his briefing today, and I hope that has been helpful to all our participants. And as we have emphasized, please do get in touch with Michael Faber or myself, Don Ward, and we will be happy to connect you with this excellent initiative. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.